Cops arrest single black dad for using fake cash, unaware he is head of Homeland Security. A quiet morning turns chaotic when a hard-working single dad stops by a local diner after picking up his son from school. When he pays the bill, the waitress looks uneasy. Moments later, two police cruisers pull up outside. The cops storm in, slam him against the counter, and accuse him of using counterfeit cash. His son screams for them to stop, but they ignore him. Onlookers film as the father, calm but humiliated, tries to explain, "Check it again. You're making a mistake." But the officers won't listen. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. It started like any other day for Michael Cross, a single father trying to balance work, parenthood, and a life most would call ordinary. He promised his 10-year-old son, Eli, that after school they'd grab pancakes at his favorite diner, a small place tucked on the corner of Maple and 7th, where the waitress always smiled and the jukebox still worked. Michael wore his usual, pressed shirt, quiet confidence, no hint of who he truly was beneath the surface. To everyone else, he looked like any working-class dad trying to get by. After finishing their meal, Michael pulled out a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. It wasn't unusual, he'd just come from a morning briefing and hadn't had time to stop at an ATM. The waitress took the bill with a polite smile but paused as she turned to the register. Her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed. Then she whispered something to the manager. Within minutes, two police cruisers screeched to a stop outside the diner. The sound of tires on asphalt turned heads. Eli looked up, confused. Michael turned toward the door as two uniformed officers entered, hands already resting on their holsters. "Sir, step away from the counter," one of them barked. Michael frowned. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Don't play smart," the taller one snapped. "We got a call about counterfeit cash being used here." The waitress stood behind them, wringing her hands nervously. The entire diner had gone silent. The smell of coffee and maple syrup hung in the air, thick with tension. Michael's voice stayed calm. "That's a mistake. The bill's real. Check it with a scanner." But the shorter cop had already grabbed his arm. "We'll handle it downtown." Eli stood up, panic in his eyes. "Dad?" Michael tried to reassure him, "It's okay, buddy. They're just—" Before he could finish, he was shoved against the counter. The cuffs clicked tight around his wrists. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. "Sir, please," the manager said quietly, "they just have to check, it's procedure." Michael looked at him, expression calm, but eyes cold. Procedure doesn't start with humiliation. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the flashing lights, painting the street in red and blue. Neighbors peeked out from shops, whispering. Some thought he was a thief. Others just stared, phones out, ready for a viral moment. One cop lifted the fake bill with gloved fingers, squinting at it. "Yeah, this paper doesn't feel right." Michael gave a weary sigh. "That's because it's a special security print, but you wouldn't know that." "Save it," the officer said. "We'll verify it back at the station." As they shoved him into the back seat, Eli ran after them, tears streaking down his cheeks. "He didn't do anything," he shouted. "My dad's not a criminal." The taller cop turned, his tone dismissive. "Kid, if your dad didn't want trouble, he shouldn't have tried to pass fake money." The car door slammed shut. Inside, Michael looked out the window, his reflection split between flashing lights and his son's terrified face. He didn't yell, didn't fight back. He simply muttered under his breath, "You just made the biggest mistake of your careers." And as the cruiser pulled away, the first officer noticed something he hadn't before, an official Homeland Security badge tucked in Michael's wallet, half visible through the open bag on the seat. Back at the precinct, Officer Turner tossed the so-called fake bill onto the evidence table with a smug grin. "Another one trying to play smart," he said, scribbling notes on his clipboard. His partner, Officer Mills, leaned against the wall, sipping coffee. "Single dad, huh? Probably thought he could get away with it. They all think they're smarter than the system." In the holding cell, Michael Cross sat quietly. His hands rested on his knees, wrists still red from the cuffs. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. His son, Eli, sat outside with a social worker, tears drying on his cheeks as he clutched his father's jacket. Across the room, a rookie officer picked up the $100 bill to log it into evidence. As he scanned it with the counterfeit detector, the machine beeped, not in rejection, but in authorization. Confused, he tried again. Same result. The scanner identified it as a government-issued security test note, not regular currency. Sergeant, the rookie called out, nervous. You might want to see this. Turner waved him off. What is it now? The bill isn't fake. It's coded as a federal clearance note. It's not even in the public system. Turner frowned. What the hell does that mean? Before anyone could answer, the phone at the front desk rang, not the regular line, but the red internal one that almost never rang. The desk officer answered, his face draining of color as he listened. Who? Yes, sir. He's here. Right now. Everyone in the room went still. The officer slowly set the phone down, eyes wide. That was Homeland Security, he said quietly. They want him released immediately. Turner laughed nervously. You're joking, right? But his smirk faded when 3 black SUVs rolled up outside the station. The sound of synchronized car doors opening echoed through the lot. Moments later, men and women in dark suits and earpieces strode into the lobby. The lead agent flashed a badge so high level it didn't even have a division listed, just the eagle seal and the initials OHS, Office of Homeland Security. Where is Director Cross? The agent demanded. The entire room froze. Turner blinked. Director who? The agent's jaw tightened. Director Michael Cross, Head of Homeland Security Enforcement Division. Where is he? Mills stammered. He's in holding. Within seconds, the agents unlocked the cell. Michael stood, straightening his cuffs with quiet precision. Took you long enough, he said calmly. The agents nodded respectfully. One of them handed him his coat while another whispered something about Eli waiting outside. The 2 officers who arrested him stood by, pale and speechless. Turner tried to speak. Sir, we didn't know. Michael turned to face him, eyes cold but voice steady. That's the problem. You didn't care to know. The entire station seemed to shrink under the weight of his presence. Even the captain, who had rushed down after hearing the news, hesitated at the doorway. Director Cross, I assure you this was a misunderstanding. Michael raised an eyebrow. A misunderstanding? He stepped closer, his tone low but powerful. Your officers threw me against a counter in front of my child. They refused to scan a bill because of the color of my skin. That's not a misunderstanding, Captain. That's systemic failure. The captain had no response. Outside, the agents guided Eli to his father. The boy ran to him, hugging tightly. I told them you didn't do anything, Dad, Eli whispered. Michael smiled faintly and placed a hand on his son's head. I know, buddy. I know. As they walked toward the exit, the media had already begun to gather. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, microphones extended, and the headline was already forming. Police arrest Head of Homeland Security, mistaken for counterfeiter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Michael paused at the door and turned back one last time. Train your officers to see people, not profiles, he said evenly. Then he walked out, leaving a room full of silent, humiliated cops behind. By the time Michael and Eli reached home, the world already knew. Clips of the arrest had flooded social media, filmed by half a dozen bystanders inside the diner. One video showed the moment Michael was slammed against the counter, his son screaming for help. Another captured his calm voice saying, "Check it again. You're making a mistake." The videos spread like wildfire. Within hours, hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Justice for Michael Cross. Hashtag Homeland Security Dad. Hashtag Racial Bias in Blue. News anchors replayed the footage in disbelief. That man, one reporter said, is not a suspect, he's the Director of Homeland Security Enforcement, overseeing counterterrorism operations across the United States. The irony hit hard. The same man who spent his life protecting the country had just been handcuffed and humiliated by the people sworn to serve it. Outside the police department, protesters gathered. Signs waved through the air, "We see the truth now, no more profiling, protect and respect." The pressure on local officials built like a storm. The mayor called an emergency meeting. The police chief tried to contain the fallout, claiming it was a regrettable procedural error. But the public wasn't buying it. Federal oversight committees demanded reports. Civil rights groups filed official complaints. And at the center of it all, Michael stayed silent, for now. He didn't need to speak. The video had said enough. Meanwhile, the two officers, Turner and Mills, faced internal suspension. Their names were plastered across headlines, their faces dissected in viral clips. Some defended them, saying they made an honest mistake. Others saw the truth plain as day, it wasn't about a fake bill. It was about assumption. On the third day, Homeland Security held a press conference. Dozens of reporters packed the room, cameras flashing as Michael Cross stepped onto the stage. Dressed sharply in his dark blue suit, the same quiet confidence he had at the diner returned, but this time, the world was watching. He adjusted the mic. 3 days ago, he began, I was arrested in front of my son for using what officers believed was counterfeit cash. It wasn't. But that isn't the point. His voice carried through the room, steady, deliberate. The point, he continued, is how quickly a person can be reduced to a stereotype. How easily judgment replaces procedure. How fast respect disappears when you stop seeing a human being and start seeing a suspect. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I don't want apologies, he said. I want accountability. I want my son to grow up in a world where a uniform means protection, not fear. Where a child doesn't have to watch his father be handcuffed for paying for breakfast. Flashes from cameras lit his face as he finished, I serve this country to make it safer. But safety starts with justice. The room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, but the loud, raw kind that echoed truth. Outside, Eli watched proudly from the side of the stage. His father wasn't just a hero in uniform, he was a symbol of strength, dignity, and restraint. And as Michael stepped down, shaking hands with journalists and citizens alike, one thing became clear, this wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. The storm that began in a small-town diner ended up shaking the entire nation. Within a week, departments across the country announced new training programs focused on bias awareness and procedural reform. The same precinct that once mocked Michael Cross now stood under federal review. But for Michael, it was never about revenge, it was about example. He returned to duty quietly, his name now known to millions, though he never sought fame. When reporters asked how he felt about the officers who humiliated him, he simply said, they're not the enemy. Ignorance is. At home, life slowly returned to normal. One evening, Michael sat on the porch with Eli as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and amber. The boy rested his head on his father's shoulder. Dad, he said softly, are you still mad at them? Michael looked out across the street, where kids played, laughter echoing. No, he replied after a moment. Because being angry doesn't change people. Showing them what's right does. Eli nodded, trying to understand. Michael smiled faintly. Remember this, son, power doesn't come from your badge or your title. It comes from how you use it. In the distance, a news van drove past, displaying his image with the headline. From victim to voice, Director Cross calls for change. He turned off the TV later that night, not needing to see his face on another broadcast. His mission was already done. The same community that once looked away now looked within. And somewhere deep down, even the two officers who'd arrested him were learning what true justice actually meant. Michael's final words in an interview summed it up best. "I don't want to be remembered for what they did to me, I want to be remembered for what we changed after."